Okay, so welcome back to the last session of today's agenda. I mean, of course, you have barbecue in the evening, that's a different story. But as part of the official thing, now we'll have a panel discussion for next 1.5 hours. The panel discussion would be about the sustainability aspects of renewable energy technologies and the pathways for future society. But before starting anything, I mean, as it is said elsewhere, the most important and first step in finding out a right solution is to come up with a right question. So let's spend some time to ponder over some of the key questions that deal with sustainability of renewable energy technologies and some societal aspects of sustainability. So, just to trigger some questions, this plot over there, the left one, this basically shows the plot of 30 days in solar energy data, wind energy data, and the power demand curve. The blue one is the wind data for 30 days, and the yellow one is the solar, and the red one is the demand. What does this show basically? This shows basically one of the key inherent properties of renewable energy sources. That is, they are fluctuating. Not just fluctuating in some small range, they are fluctuating huge. You can see it here, especially for the wind and solar. So they are not as like other conventional technologies, that is the case. And if you see the plot here, it shows the exponential increase in the installation of solar PV plants in Germany, and it is estimated that 1.3 million PV plants have been installed already in different geography of Germany. So these are already leading to some distribution grid issues wherever there is high PV penetration. So, I mean, even at this level, they are causing various problems in terms of system operation, power quality, and the power regulation. So, one of the key questions, or some questions to start off with might be, for example, is it really possible to have a very high shares of REs in near future? Especially, you might have heard about some scenarios wherein they project or they try to have the roadmap for 80% scenarios, more than 60%, or even some people talk about 100% renewable energy scenarios. So is it really possible to do that? That would be one of the interesting questions. And if yes, I mean, what might be the limitations that might be faced in the deployment of REs? And what kind of additional challenges or infrastructure we need to really achieve these scenarios? And more important than that, is it just enough just to concentrate on the high scenarios of REs? What about the other aspects of sustainability? So to move on, let's also look at the motivation for the renewable energy sources. You already saw this plot in different ways in the morning talk by Sarah and also by Professor Nicopai. One thing is clear is CO2 emissions are going up, and we are around 390 now, somewhere here. And we need to reduce the CO2 budget. So renewable energies are one of the competitive technologies in this regard. That is straightforward. But what about the other environmental aspects of renewable energies? Say, for example, environment is not just CO2 balance. Environment has many other different dimensions. Say, what about the impact of REs on resource depletion, species extinction, loss of natural habitat, and so on? I mean, how do REs really perform on that? So, or in other words, is environment only the motivation of renewable energy technologies, or we have some more motivations from economics and social benefits? So these questions also need to be addressed in a systematic way, I would say in near future, if we are really serious about renewable energies and sustainability. And moreover, more than this, what about the developing economies? Do they offer any additional incentives for R&D deployment than the developed economies? And what about, I mean, there are statistics still say, I mean, half of the world still goes to bed hungry each day. I mean, this problem of poverty that is in low and middle economies, it's huge. Can REs do anything to solve this problem of poverty, or they are not at all related because they are just some technology? What is it? I mean, so if there is any linkages between renewable energies and other developmental efforts, I would say these are some of the key questions which we should start thinking about or start asking about. So, for example, what are the linkages between REs and other developmental efforts? For example, poverty alleviation, is there any relation with that? Or international justice, reducing social inequality, which are some of the major problems we find everywhere at even international and national level. And we often hear, renewable energies are costlier. Yeah, that's true. But it depends in what context we make that statement. And many times we say the economically developing countries and underdeveloping countries are still poor and they cannot go for REs because they are costly technology. But this guy called Schachtschneider, who is co-founder of Selco Solar, he says solar lighting is cheaper than kerosene lamps for a typical Indian street vendor. He just not say that, he has created a business model out of it and he has already sold thousands of solar lighting systems in various parts of India, and it's a success story. So in this case, we might argue solar is not costlier. So similarly, are there any other incentives like these in the economically developing world? I would say these are some of the questions which we might discuss in the next few minutes or all. And to move on, moreover, what is the role of, the sustainability is not just one small aspect, as we all know. It's a huge complex problem and renewable energies is just one part of it. So we would like to know, what is the role of REs in the overall sustainable developmental process? And how can REs be integrated in the future societies in a better way or in a more sustainable way than the business as usual trends, instead of just following the traditional way of following ever-increasing growth or ever-increasing demand, etc. And what role the society plays in the sustainable deployment of REs? Because at the end of the day, we should not forget, technologies are just like technique. It depends on how the user uses it. So the society which is living thing, I would say how the society will be shaped strongly influences how the renewable energy technologies will be integrated in the future or deployed in the future. So I think over the next hour we will be discussing about these issues, at least try to get answers to some of these questions from our experts, and we'll have a panel discussion on that. Hopefully we'll get some good answers to them. So now I request Jonas to just present the panel discussion structure.
Thanks for the introduction. I'm Mitra Stan's wingman on stage. I'm another moderator. So I would like to introduce the panelists or gladiators in the discussion. I would like them to come on stage and sit down over there. The panelists, please. Okay. Yes, all right. I think you already know her. I don't really have to introduce her. We have Dr. Ulrich Schachtschneider. I hope you still remember him as well. Yeah, we have Golba. You already heard his comments at the previous discussion. He's the head of our PPRE course, and he's a physicist and a social scientist as well. And he will give us additional insights. And we have a special guest, which is Philipp Biermann. He's a PhD student at Oldenburg University, and he majored in economy, and he does research on the social acceptance on renewable energy, for example. And I think this gives us a nice insight as well. So those are our panelists. Welcome everybody. This is our structure. So at first we give each of the panelists you see here 5 minutes to tackle the main questions you were just presenting on Intervention. So this will take 20 minutes. Then we have a discussion among the panelists, which is sort of guided by the moderators, but maybe we don't even have a job and they just discuss among themselves. And then we want you to think about some questions and think about some comments you might have and take part in the discussion. So we have another 30 minutes with all of you. And I hope we can you can start a nice thing. So those are our key questions. And I think, Mr. Shan, you can sit down. Yeah, or maybe for the I don't really know who of you wants to start. Do you have any preference? Maybe we start on the left with Michael Golba.
It's not easy to bring down, to my understanding, over complexity to not answer, but at least to address some of the questions. The main question I would like to address is what is the role of renewable in a sustainable society? If you remember two buzzwords, for example, globalization on one hand side, and secondly, sustainability, and you can see that there is still a variety of interpretations. So there is a difference in regulations, a difference in requesting concerning sustainability, for example. But there is one thing I would like to highlight. Since, let's say, 4 to 5 decades, there is a constant discourse on the term.
Sorry for can you move the mic?
Yeah, there is still, or since, let's say, 4 or 5 decades, a constant discourse on sustainability, for example, and globalization as well. And most of you have seen or have listened to Nico Pape's presentation last night or last evening. And if you recall the one slide where he was showing us very interestingly the mobility of flights on the world screen, if we imagine the same story with the term sustainability, then you would see that over the, let's say, last 30 years, we would have a constant and even increasing flashing of lights, whereas the communication of sustainability is represented by each flash. So, I mean, you can imagine the picture he showed last night, and then I would like to invite you not only to understand, to take this picture, but also to maybe broaden the scope to two areas. If we understand a highly sophisticated social system, then it's not only the flashing, the overall flashing of a particular term you can observe, or you would have observed during the last 30 years, but you could probably observe the flashing, the increasing flashing of this term in almost all the subsystems of the society. And my second step now is, if you understand that this is also the case of renewable energy, we can I would like to draw your attention to this picture. So we have a constant, still increasing flashing of two terms, no matter of their definition, but they are well situated and well posed in almost all of the communication systems nowadays. So this is, I mean, just to start with. When I am now asked about the role of renewable energy, I would only strengthen on one particular point at the start of the discussion. Therefore, I need another term. The term is inclusive and exclusive. If you, another time, remember this flashing, then you will see that there are some already still dark spots on the map. And so I can see, for several reasons, renewable energy, no matter if we like it or not, as an inclusive measure to bring in still those into the picture, I mean, into the map, flashing, who at the moment, to an extent of about 1.3, 1.4, 1.5 billion, still have no access of electricity. So this is, my focus would be that, my statement, first statement at the beginning is the role of renewable energy, in particular towards the developing world, could be to integrate, to include, at the moment, excluded millions and billions of people into the blinking system or the flashing system of society. No matter of the definition and no matter of we like it or not. So this may be a start, so just my 5 minutes are up.
Yeah, okay, so I will try to talk a little bit about the economic point of view on this subject, renewable energy. So let me come to the role of renewable energy in a sustainable society. Of course, it delivers first of all the energy which is needed for production for our output. So it is kind of an input factor for economic activity. And in economics, it is very popular to talk about how can we replace fossil fuels with renewable energy. And there are, on the one hand, the climate reasons, and on the other hand, these comparative advantage reasons. So politicians are telling us that if we are able to make renewable energy cheaper, and if we are, we don't only save the climate, but on the other hand, we have kind of an export advantage, and we can sell our products to the world. And in all of these models, what is missing compared to the approach of Nico Pech yesterday is that you always think of replacing the same amount of energy with renewables. But the focus is not so much on reducing the amount of energy which is used. So I think that today and yesterday we talked a lot about the demand side. And in economic models, what many people see as a problem is that the demand side is always seen as inelastic. So if the price goes up, there is the same demand always. So you have a certain demand at a certain time, and then you optimize your model, or the producers optimize the amount of energy produced to this demand, to meet the demand. So I think that economics needs a lot more exchange with other sciences, especially social science and of course physics, to talk about how can we implement demand side argumentation into our economic models. To the limitations of sustainable deployment of renewable energies, of course, this is a classic economic problem. You have, on the one hand side, one problem of renewables is that they have flexible working hours. And imagine always this steady demand, you have the wind blowing, and then the demand is fixed. And you need some amount of energy, and if there is no wind blowing or no sun shining, then renewables don't solve the problem. So the hope is that you find methods of storage or reserve for that. And another thing that is very challenging is that a colleague of mine from Canada, Scott Taylor, he wrote an article where he says renewable energy is no technology that will save us from climate change. So even if we come to a world where we boost this renewable energy a lot, this will not lead to a solution for the climate change problem. And another important issue that was also mentioned already is finance, of course. If we think of a world without growth, then we have a certain amount of production factors, and we need to buy some production factors at least to produce these renewable energy facilities and power plants. So without promising you to get a return in interest and whatever produced by growth, how can we ensure that we have a possibility to use our resources, our production factors with this renewable energy, and not that, like in the US, the shale gas guys come around and say, here we have a cheaper method, and that is boosting our growth and so on. So maybe these are some points that I discussed during the discussion.
Thank you very much. Okay, what is the role of renewable energies in sustainable development? I would not be so pessimistic as to say that renewable energies will not help us with climate change. I think they will. But we have to take care that we have to take care in a large part that renewable and sustainable is not equivalent. And for you, I think this is all very clear. If you come from a more technical background, I would say not so much. And what we've also seen is that there has been this link between renewables and sustainable economic development. That this link can break is something I see in my personal acquaintance, where people who have studied physics and have been working in the photovoltaic industry did lose their jobs and are now looking for something else. So where's the link in that? Another point, I like the last question about the limitations for the sustainable development of renewables. And I think if we, I think I also said that already to somebody who was asking me during a coffee break, there is a huge potential in renewable energies, but you have to get things right. People have to cooperate. If you think of projects like some follow-up of Desertec, it is, from a technical perspective, still very attractive. And I think it can also be sustainable and be an aid to the people in the vicinity to give cheap electricity to them as well. But it has to be implemented in this way. I think that is one of the great challenges. Renewables do have a lot of positive potential, but you need to get a lot of cooperation and coordination in order to make to distribute this benefit fairly and not to exploit. Yeah, I think that's right.
Yes, okay, what are the limitations for sustainable development, deployment of renewables? First, technical. Yes, the problem of storaging is mentioned from my colleague, and yes, you all know this limitations, this thermodynamic laws, that's clearly a limitation, and yes, natural materials and resources are limiting the success, the possible role of renewables too. And yes, the societal limitations, I talked about this a little bit. I think these are the prices for the renewables, and how we solve this problem that renewables, firstly, maybe also for a long time, are a little bit more expensive than the very cheap fossil fuels. And there's who pays these prices that brings us societal limitations. That's a problem we have to answer, and that is a problem for the politics too. Yes, the economical limitations. okay, that's the energy return on energy input. It must be a positive calculation. You must get more return than you have put in before. And yes, so that describes the role of the possible role of renewables. And yes, the societal limitation is also the culture. Renewables are a technology, technology strategy, and yes, it's not sufficient. My colleague said this too, and we cannot solve the climate problem only with renewables. We have to look for sufficiency and another culture.
Okay, thanks for the some of the questions and viewpoints you put forth. So I would say now we will start with the discussion among panel members. So you would like to take something on your own, or shall we take something? I mean, if you don't agree with some of your what Becker you said, I mean, you can just take on.
Yeah, okay. My view would be to reduce at the very beginning this kind of over complexity, since if we don't do so, then we are talking, each of us is talking about a particular aspect or a particular glimpse or perspective. So I would rather like that we, in some kind of depth, focus on maybe one point. I mean, the point I brought in, I can only offer you this point, is I can see, which is to my mind quite easy, I can see a good future or to instrumentalize renewable energy by electrifying rural areas in Africa and basically in Southern Asia. So we have still 600 in Africa and on the same figure in Asia, which have no access to electricity. And okay, my argument is this is not only not having access to electricity, my argument is they don't have access to a modern society. So, I mean, whether we like it or not, yesterday you can even draw the conclusion, okay, we better keep it like it is, then they have no access to a modern life. This is less consumption, but I would say the question now is, renewables can do this job properly, and they already did it in a quite speedy or, let's say, accelerating path. For example, Brazil, you can see that there is a particular program. I don't want to go into many details, but I cannot see a fast integration or inclusion of this 1.5 billion people without renewable energy. So this is in a way, it's a very simple approach. So it's a very positive thing if we agree on inclusion in modern lives. Since this will, by the way, change their lifestyles completely.
Okay, thank you. I sort of wanted to connect three statements three of you just made. Michael, you started by giving maybe people from rural communities and developing countries access to electricity and including them to maybe some sort of modernity by renewable energy. And you also talked about the increasing flashing of renewable energy as a chance, maybe. Philipp, at one point you were talking about the economic perspective, and you were talking about the comparative advantage. So if the industrialized countries start investing in renewable energy now, they have a comparative advantage and can sell their products better if they are already investing in this technology. And Sarah, you make one statement saying that how can we distribute the profits from renewable energy? like sort of evenly, because at the moment I only see that maybe industrialized countries are profiting from this, and I sort of want to connect all of the three statements you wanted to make. Do you have an idea? Do you have an idea to this? Maybe how can renewable energy maybe increase the intra-generational justice, or the global justice, or northern-southern injustice we have in this world?
Okay, first I want to come up with another point. Renewable energy is not only solar and wind power plants, there's also biofuels. And if you think about the big discussion about biofuels and the trade-off between plants used to produce biofuels going on the plate or going into power plants, this might even be kind of development towards new social conflicts worldwide. So, of course, it is nice to talk about renewable energies helping us to diminish inequality and to include people worldwide. But on the other hand, it might be the case that in some aspects of these renewable energies we also have some potential for future conflict worldwide. So we can discuss this as well and not only look at the positive side of these. We all think of PV panels and wind turbines, but there are also these biofuels and the trade.
Okay, but I would just like to highlight one of the statements you made. You said RE technologies will not save the climate change, or not. You made it a bit strong, but I would. Does any of the other panel members have something to say on that statement? At some point.
Just very short. First, this is not my statement. This was Scott Taylor from Calgary who said this, and he was investigating if renewable energy is sufficient to save us from climate change. And he just wanted to remark that we have to put the scope in terms of climate change also on international agreements for climate protection, and not only relying on, okay, we will now boost renewable energy and that will save us from climate change. So the statement is not that strong that they are not helping us against or doing their part in prevention of climate change, but that this is not the only solution to stick with renewable energies. This is the statement.
It's just a part.
Yeah, it's a part of the solution, of course, but it is not sufficient to save us from the climate problem.
But just to highlight some of the, to highlight or to go more deeper into the limitations of sustainable deployment of REs. According to, what do you think? Some of the major limitations that are hindering the future growth of REs. We have a present structure, whole of the electricity network and all the system, economic system, societal system. So, but what is your opinion? And by the introduction of REs, we are questioning all of this pattern completely, or we can just go with the same pattern?
I think there is, at least if you look at the electricity system, you need a sort of paradigm shift, really. Because, as you said, the electricity system is designed to respond to the demand. And suddenly you have wind and solar power that have a mind of their own. And that, apart from climate change, are quite out of our reach to influence. And I think what we do need is a shift. Either you can try and sort of include wind and solar into the load, so you only look at the residual load and then you try to meet that with the remaining power plants or storage or whatever you have. Or you can maybe take a different view on that. But so I think what we really need is sort of a paradigm shift in the system. At least if you are looking at a developed country like Germany, you are going to need much less baseload plants that provide the same amount of electricity basically all the time.
Yeah, I mean, I see your point, but when you say paradigm shift, I mean, you say only in the dimension of technology, or you mean it to all the other spheres? I mean, for example, economics as well. And there is the way in which the economics of the society works.
I'm not an expert on economics,
Yeah.
but I think if you want to achieve this paradigm shift, you also have to rethink how you organize your electricity market. Because at the moment, wind and solar power are sold at basically zero marginal price, which means whenever there is wind and solar, the price goes down, which makes the gap between the guaranteed feed-in tariffs and what is gained from selling even larger. You need to change market structures, but I'm not an expert on how to do that.
I would like to understand what you mean by paradigm change. I mean, I agree completely. You have to probably think of adequate market design. This is probably the case, but what is the qualitative shift with this? I mean, this is not definitely you have to do it, but this is a very technical or economically driven shift from one subsidy-driven or whatever incentive-driven system to incorporating even demand-side management or research on this part, research on other parts. But what is the paradigm shift? I would like to know what you
what I meant was the shift from thinking of the electricity system as something, I think as Philipp also pointed out in his introduction, that from something that just reacts to demand to something that's active and takes over an active role and also gives feedback to the customer and changes their behavior.
I agree completely, but I wouldn't call it shift since I believe that the prerequisites for accomplishing this results, so to speak, I would call it a big shift, are already there. Since you have an organization, a social organization of the complete system, who is open now for a very flexible and a very individual organized system. So I can see really a market, even a request for a very flexible and open system in many aspects. In general, nor me nor others do exactly how the design will look like, but I think in a highly industrialized country like, not highly industrialized, I would rather like to say in a highly modernized society, social organized society, the shift towards a very flexible, integrating consumer needs, even integrating the organization of demand by the consumer is very likely to have. So I would never see this as a shift. Whereas, I mean, to get my argument, if you go to a country, for example, let's say even in South Africa, where the modernization development is not that fast developed in this sense, you might run into a lot more difficulties to establish demand-side management, flexibilities, integrating individuals in the organization of the system.
Yeah, but can you would like to comment on this? For example, this paradigm shift. I mean, yeah.
Yes, I think it's important to have a paradigm shift in price policies. We don't should have no longer cheap prices. This idea every time have cheap energy prices. That's mainstream thinking in the rich societies. But I think we have to change this paradigm. That's not easy, I know this, but how we should gain incentives for efficiency. We talked about this. We cannot solve the problem only with renewables. We need ambitious incentives for more efficiency, and we need incentives for sufficiency. And we could reach this with high prices for energy. So I have two alternatives. I'm preferring the solution which is more efficient, or I prefer the zero solution. I don't consume anything. High prices leads to these two alternatives, and these alternatives are needed both. But when we would introduce higher prices by special policy, that would cause an increase in social inequality. And as how to manage this, that's for me an important question. And there's one idea. We can share all the revenues of the taxation of energy use. We can share the revenues to every citizen. So we have a redistribution combined with higher prices. And in this system, we can even introduce globalize. So if we, for instance, introduce a global carbon tax, we could share these revenues equal to each global citizen. And then the so-called less developed countries would benefit more, because more people are living there.
I think this is a good idea, and I would like to add some background on the higher pricing. There are some studies out that I would consider of good quality that have looked into the external costs of the energy generation. For instance, harm done to people by air pollution. And I think the CO2 tax is one idea to internalize these costs and to make the real cost transparent. And also, as you talked about cheap prices as a means of economic support to foster economic growth, I was reminded of the subsidy statistics that was published by the IEA last year, which showed that renewables get about 1/6 of the subsidies that fossils get still. This is worldwide statistics, and it also includes developing countries where there is a strong focus on fostering growth, and therefore energy is getting heavily subsidized. But going from a point where I see energy as a means of fostering growth to a point where I really value it and try to save it, because in the long run it's necessary for us. That's an important point.
I'd just like to step back and what Dr. Uli was saying. If I get you correct, you try to highlight, the higher price of renewable energy directly or indirectly can contribute towards sufficiency and efficiency, right? Yes. So if this is the point, then I would like to go back to what Philipp made some comments. Again, we have no discussion. Say, for example, we agreed, or it was a general agreement that REs are one part of the climate change problem. They can be one solution to the climate change problem, and there might be many. But if we take this, then we see something. For example, REs are also interlinked with other solutions. For example, sufficiency. Sufficiency can also be a solution to the climate change problem. And we saw these statements as an independent statement earlier. But I kind of see some links here. Do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, of course. there is this link between REs and saving the climate. Or if you have zero emission technologies, what is better for going in the right direction for saving the climate. But I think it is problematic if you only talk about, or if you always have in mind the electricity market or electricity production while talking about renewable energy. So for example, if I go to Shell or ExxonMobil and tell them, make increase or decrease your emissions by 5%, what do? They create a new fuel which has 5% more biofuels in it. We have this going on in Germany over the last years, and then they will sell it on the market, and they will reach a decrease of 5% by then. So by using biofuels that are grown on fields.
But actually, I don't think that is a really 5% decrease, because you have to take the whole life cycle of the biodiesel into account. And I had an example this morning where somebody did a life cycle analysis of Denmark, and he ended up that mainly due to the CO2 content that is released from the soil when you change its use, actually biomass was performing worse than taking fossil fuel.
Yeah, of course. But
so I mean, this kind of calculation, I just took 5% biofuel and now that's completely CO2 free.
No,
it's just not true.
Of course not.
I mean, I don't know.
But usually policymakers are not that aware of the difference of an input-output measure and the life cycle analysis. So the majority of scientists,
I can satisfy the politicians.
You can make your input-output calculation, and you have this very nice number of 5% less or 5% decarbonization in these elements. So I think the discussion has to be that also economists have to make these life cycle assessments instead of these input-output measures, because, for example, one interesting fact is that taking the life cycle assessment of products, the dirtiest city in China is still 6 times cleaner than the cleanest city in the US, just because of the different type of calculation. So this is a big challenge for economics over the next years. If we want to have a worldwide climate policy, and that is, I think it's common sense that this is what we need, worldwide climate policy, then we have to take into account where we cause climate damages and through which channels. And not only looking anymore at the local markets, at the local emissions, at the local climate areas, because climate is something global, and you cannot find local solutions.
But I get the point, but I would like to rephrase my previous question or comment again. I mean, I would say it's totally clear that renewables at least contribute to climate change, but I think what Dr. Ulrich tried to, at least what I got from that was, I mean, they, apart from contributing towards climate change, renewables can also play some role towards the concepts of sufficiency and efficiency, which go far beyond just climate change. So, if it is the case, then there is some kind of synergy between different solutions.
So where do you see the concrete link?
I would like to answer the question. Do you see any link there or not at all? Would you like to say something more on that or elaborate on what you said?
I saw no contradiction to my idea. Where you have some idea of high prices and redistribute the revenues of these eco-taxes. Maybe there are contradictions. I'm wondering a little bit.
Mr. just said that maybe like whether or not renewable energy can increase efficiency or sufficiency. But I'm not really sure whether renewable energy really is playing a big role in increasing sufficiency, or maybe it's just another argument for saying, okay, our energy grid now is clean, so we can waste as much energy as we want. So this is not really like a sufficiency concept, right?
No.
What Ulrich, what you said was that a higher price would increase the sufficiency and the efficiency, and would pave the way for a faster deployment for renewable energy, but not that renewable energy is by itself more sufficient or anything.
I think if you wanted to construct a link between at least maybe efficiency and renewables, you might think of the example of electric cars. You can say, I take the battery, I charge it whenever wind is abundant, and in this way it contributes to a renewable energy system. And also electric cars are far more efficient, and so my total energy supply, the total energy supply I'm going to need goes down. But like a real direct link, I don't think I see.
I can see no link at all. I mean, since there is definitely a link between research and competitiveness concerning effectiveness. This is of course the case, but this is the case in this applies to every energy and every other subject on the market, to every commodity. So there is no preference towards renewable energy when it comes to efficiency. And I can hardly see any relation between sufficiency and renewable energy. And I cannot imagine. This, in my understanding, is indeed a paradigm shift. If you want to foster renewable production, this is very tricky for the economy, I think. To revenue nothing, or to revenue a negative result in this sense. But this is really a shift. But others are adjustments, maybe bigger adjustments. As the energy vendor, for me, it's not a shift. It's a very complex adjustment, but probably it's within the boundaries of the social system. I'm not expecting any kind of change concerning the overall structure of society when it comes to energy. Not really, hardly anything. And I just want to remind you that, let's say, at least 30 years back, renewable energy was all the time identified or attributed to a more democratic, organized energy. And I think this is only to a very, very minor extent the case. I mean, the energy vendor will have to incorporate huge plants, vast investments. So how can I see this being coupled to a democratic, organized energy system? To a certain extent, of course, but then I can also say, okay, then we can also have coal-fired power plants being democratically owned by whatever institution or organization. This is nothing which is really related to renewable energy. This is an illusion.
So you don't think that renewable energy cooperatives are the solution for the planet? But rather the solution would be like a big investment in renewable energy by big corporations or big companies, or this would be...
I think the point is being a cooperative and being renewable are two factors that are just not linked together. You can do both.
They might be.
Even a cooperative needs industrial production for PV panels, for instance, or for the steel of the windmills. And even cooperatives need political regulation. would not have this 20% share of renewable electricity in Germany without strong regulation by the EEG. So otherwise, maybe there would be some cooperators with people with alternative lifestyles, as we have had this in the 80s, but that is only a very, very small share, a very small social group which is willing to invest in such a technology without getting back their revenues, their investments. Sorry. So we need the regulation, and that's most important. We need the big policy.
Maybe I can make a comment on democracy, on the link between democracy and renewable energy, because I think as opposed to the traditional, like conventional energy system we had before, like with renewable energy, for the first time, we do have the chance at all to make energy production democratic, just due to the size of the plants and due to the price of the plants, and due to the decentralized way they work, or they are able to work. I mean, before you just had a nuclear power plant and nobody could pay, no cooperative could pay this, or no neighborhood or transition.
You don't want it on the
Can I comment on this? Yes and no at the same time. Yes, because it's just a fact, but no, it's not exclusively for renewable energy. I mean, if you look at the music production and the incorporation of consumers when musicians produce, then you can also say this has nothing to do with the music. It has more to do with the social organization of the society, the tendency of a high flexibility and high individualism. So, and this indeed is, you can link to renewable energy, of course, but you can also link it to so many other aspects.
But I get the point, but can we link this to the conventional power plants, for example?
No.
So in that sense, I mean, here I would say we are comparing renewables with other energy technologies, which might make the case more strong, because say for example there are other technologies which don't cooperate this, and renewables offer this cooperation. So I mean, we take decisions from this angle, right? I mean, for example, if I am going for a renewable energy, I would not like to compare renewable energy with a say for example some music or some CD player. I would like to compare the renewable energy with other energy technology. What do you say?
Yeah, actually, if you go to the financial market or to the stock market and you buy some shares of RWE or some big energy companies, then you can directly calculate how much of an owner you are of a nuclear power plant. So the argument doesn't hold that this is a feature of renewable energy, that you have this kind of common sense financing. Common financing. That is already the case if you go to the stock market and buy some shares of the big companies. So I just want to say this is it is not that big power plants or some are not affordable by a wide range of people.
But still, I think renewable energies at least have a history of being rather community-owned. PV panels on rooftops and so on. If you think of Germany, you're definitely right that if you are going to substantial shares of renewables, you will need big plants. I mean, I also showed you some numbers this morning, and you are pretty soon out of the scope of an individual wind turbine for a village or something. But I think if you go back to the beginning of the discussion, where we also discussed developing countries, I think the story might be a little different, especially if you are in an area where you don't have a lot of infrastructure and you don't have a big centralized electricity grid. Maybe you have no electricity I don't know, maybe we can...
Okay, just before switching to Dr. Ulrich, just a comment. Now, I mean, we'll open to the audience as well. I mean, you can also intervene with the discussion. I mean, we have some.
I think they can talk without the microphone. If you speak up, it's fine.
Yeah, please.
Just have a very big question, linking all the things together. As you said, that 1.2 billion people in the world still don't have electricity yet, no access to electricity. And yesterday we have this lecture on post-growth economics where we talk about sufficiency or maybe like interest with the banks, banks giving the loans without any interest, something like that. And we have on the other side developing countries exploiting the natural resources, where if you see the statistics like from 1990 to till 2000, the CO2 produced by developing countries is like 48%. There is a growth from 1990 levels, and from 2000 to 2010, the growth of CO2 is almost 81% from the levels of 1990. So at one phase we say that developing countries need more renewables because they don't have any access to electricity. At the other hand, the developed countries, they are industrializing the developing countries because you are giving the technology and other things, and you are also giving like cars and bikes and all those stuff. Because of that, this pollution, which is a tremendous growth, 81% is not less actually. And it's my experience that I have seen in my own country, the number of usage of bikes and cars is more than the normal cycles or the bikes usage. The developed countries have learned so many things by the mistakes which they did with industrialization, but I don't know why you guys are more focusing on industrializing developing countries. You are not focusing on the sustainability aspects. You are not teaching them the sustainability aspects. Like you all guys go there and there is no culture developed like you all here having here. You use bikes here, you use the bikes, but in developing countries, hardly people are using bikes. They all want to use motorbikes. They all want to use cars, and I don't understand. You guys all learned all these things that we are not. We have to use these things very less. You guys should promote more usage of the bikes, what you are using here, and more sustainability things. You should actually, the developed countries should focus also on these things rather than only on industrializing the developing countries. That's what my comment is, and I don't know what focus you guys had when you talk about making access of electricity for these developing countries. It's a kind of mixed question.
Anyone wants to have
Yeah, I would rather like to address this. When I started at the very beginning, to highlight this access to electricity and the inclusion of 5 or 6 or 4 billion people, this is without any justice intention, so to speak. It's just, I think, you have to offer chances for those who are not included to become part of the game, so to speak. And it's not to us to dictate or to say to what conditions they can join the game. This is my understanding. We cannot and we should not, at least I don't want to, be part of a committee or whatever and selecting particular groups of people to become part of the game, so to speak, and others, they have to stay excluded because they want to have a motorbike. As you know, in India, in your case, or in Indonesia, as in other cases, I know very well. This is overpolluted, the cities at least. But nevertheless, what right and what measures or means do we have to keep the door closed? For me, very difficult to measure.
Anyone else want to?
Here was another question.
Yeah, mine is actually a comment on Mr. Michael's introductory comments when he said the African countries, actually, communities actually should be helped to modernize with renewable energy. So basically, my comment is that there are two types of communities. Some will openly welcome development interventions, but like some, like the community in northwest of Namibia is called the Himbas. They have a huge waterfall which is a potential for hydroelectric production, and they have totally refused any modernization. Even they don't even wear modern clothing or don't use any modern stuff. They have refused, and whenever government is trying to bring up that topic of developing a dam where they can make a hydroelectric power, they totally refuse. And recently, due to pressure, the chief allowed the feasibility study, and the community actually removed him from his position. They don't want any modernization.
Comment on this?
Yeah, but I think that is what we have to keep in mind. They have the choice, right? They have the choice. But on the other hand, can we say, no, you cannot be part of the game? And that is not possible. Or I don't want that we are the dictators saying you are not part of the game and you are. So we can go there and say you may become part of the game, but if you don't want to, we don't force you to. Yeah. Yes.
Another question here.
Rather than a question, I think it's more like just another comment to this thing. So I think I don't know, but I think we might agree that one of the problems for ecological problems is inequality, and I think in developing countries, for example, speaking from my country, this inequality comes very much from education, from lack of education. So I think in this regard, renewable energies are an option to give more access to education and therefore put a choice for people to participate or not. But yes, we have education because we have electricity. That we are all here using microphones. So I think in that there are also in my country success stories. For example, in remote islands, the Galapagos Islands are famous, which are very vulnerable, and they have to project for renewable energy, so have some cooperation.
You want to comment on this?
No, I'm raised.
All right, I have another question on a slightly different stream, but I was kind of wondering how this post-growth concept fits together with the Green New Deal. Because the Green New Deal is supposed to be able to solve some of our environmental problems and economical problems at the same time. And one of the so one of the options was, we work less hours, and this will reduce our growth. So by implementing renewable energy, we're solving some of our environmental problems, and it will also develop a local economy. But I'm not sure whether it would develop a local economy, because as you saw, like we had when the PV manufacturers kind of bubble popped, the economy did slow down, but all the jobs also left at the same time. So when we slow down our economy, right, and I don't know, I don't see how it'd be financially sustainable. So we have to be environmentally sustainable, and But how do you see this can actually be achieved? Like, I like the idea, but how do you see it can actually be achieved financially? Like, how can you actually have an economy that can continue to be competitive and actually have a valuable product when it's reducing its demand? I mean, the only reason why we've been able to increase our living standard and reach the way we are now is because we reduced the manpower input to our products. We've gone increasingly industrialized, which has increased our production output. I mean, so that's the way we have a higher living standard and higher wages, and have a reduced human input. Now, what we're basically want to go back to is a higher human input again. So more human time is used, or with less product output. I don't know if you want to comment on that, but that makes sense at all.
Yes. Okay, I think if I get you right, I'm not sure. Your question is how we could combine the post-growth idea with the idea of Green New Deal and the idea of fostering innovations and industry which will bring these innovations. I think in economical history, we every time have changes in sectors, and yes, that's quite normal. Some sectors will decrease and other sectors will increase, but overall it's possible that the renewable sector and green industry sector can grow, and other sectors can overcompensate this growing. Yes, overall we have degrowth. That's possible. It's not convincingly needed that all sectors will grow. Only special green industries should grow. So that would be my answer. We do not stop innovation and such things in a degrowth economy. That's a great failure in thought. So why this should happen? Look at the economical crisis, the world economical crisis between 1998 and 1999. Did we have less innovations in this period? So I think that was not the case.
Just a small comment on that. Maybe you have to take the right starting point. The starting point of the guy saying we cannot grow anymore is that we have to see climate and resources as a production factor. And if you are economically optimizing your production, then you are at the moment already using too much. So the problem is that you are already using too much of the climate, too much of the resources, and there is the argument coming from that maybe this ongoing growth is not anymore feasible.
I would rather like to come with a maybe strong hypothesis, which is very short. As long as the main motivation for a key growth economy only comes from the environment, it will never take place. So probably research in the area will go in the direction that you can and have to identify motivations from the social systems. I cannot give an answer to that, since it's a very interesting question. But I have no, there is hardly, as far as I know, companies who will survive, or organizations who will survive without any growth for a long period. But maybe this is possible, this might be possible in the future. But as long as the growth discourse in society is only driven by the environmental concerns, it will stick in this niche area. This is my, let's say, hypothesis.
So what other motivations would there be then? Because, I mean, from an economical model, you would say, naturally, when a product becomes rare, its value goes up and it gets replaced with another one, right? So if we're running out of resources, by an economical model, you say, well, the cost of resources would go up and it would naturally reduce your consumption until, like, so it would just naturally. So what we're doing now, we want to preemptively reduce our consumption before this happens. But now we are no longer in the optimal economical situation, right? So now if one group of people goes into this scenario, while other people stay in the maybe more economically lucrative scenario, I'm wondering, can this one group remain feasible in competition in a global market?
Okay, so yeah, the point would be that maybe if you see this this price mechanism solving the usage of natural resources or planet resources, then you have the problem that, and that is what economists know already, that price for environment, that it be certificates or quotas for emissions, is not the right price. So for example, in terms of nuclear energy, there is no insurance for these power plants. You have the big damages from accidents, as we could see in 2011 from Fukushima, and that is spread to the society. And if the society would know that they are at the moment paying this price, so expected accident probability times damage, then they would maybe not, or this is not reflected in the market price. So this market price argument in terms of environment and resources is a bit weak.
You want to say something?
Just one short comment. You asked for motivation beyond ecological ideas, and I think we have a latent, strong motivation for a degrowth society, and that's that we all, less or more, suffer under the accelerating process in modern society. See the race on psychological deficiencies. It raises by the factor 8 in Germany, for instance, in the last 10 years, depressions. And yes, we have not only to look at the impacts of this accelerating society, of these impacts outside in the nature, but also look at the impacts inside, and we cannot follow these accelerating systems. And I think that is a strong motivation to say yes, less is more, and I have a high quality of life products which are produced very efficiently in industry, but I do not need all these products. So, and it's enough to work 20 hours. Keynes said, I think you know this, in the 1930s, that his children only will work 3 hours a day, and we have to ask why.
Where did we go wrong?
Where did we go wrong? So it is possible with in highly industrialized countries with efficient production to have a good life without so much products, but high efficient production.
just one thing, another maybe very abstract attribution of the problem is with the approach of the post-growth society, in my terms, it's a complete different way, whereas we are now even consistently going for an accommodation or commodification process of everything. I mean, this is what, for example, is also tax. You are just taxing good air or bad air. And this is your internalized costs. This is what the economists call. This is nothing but a commodification process. And what the strategy of a post-growth economy makes it very difficult that you're just looking in the other way. So you're just decommodificating, so to speak, areas. So you bring them back into a non-economic area, and nobody has really experiences to, let's say, re-deviate this process. I don't know if I can make myself understandable.
What do you mean commodified?
In Germany, you make everything. I mean, like air, or, for example, internalizing external costs is nothing but a commodification process. So you commodify, let's say, the air. You put a price on it. Whereas normally we can breathe without paying for it, but because of the steering of the society, you tax air, and then for a particular reason. And the concepts of post-growth, they are just trying to de-commodify particular areas. For example, in the case of that you don't work for your salary, but you work for yourself or for your inside your family. And this is a very not plausible, I don't want to say regression, but it's definitely a path which is not experienced at all. It's even, if you look at on a more abstract figure, it's even that you have regulations and you deregulate this technique in favor of non-technique, which is, I would say, extremely difficult even to think from a sociological point of view.
I think we need both. Commodification of natural goods, for instance, not air in general, but pollution of air in a certain unsustainable way. And we need decommodification. We need more common spheres where other laws and other purposes
They are different.
We need both.
But I mean, we've seen a development basically in the opposite direction in the past. Like everybody wants to have their own car because it's more convenient and I don't have to wait for it and whenever.
Yes.
Okay, but I think the audience should.
Yes.
Although there are some more questions, I think we are almost up to the time. But I would like to.
There are two guys who are really,
No.
their arms have
Give them a
been
chance,
already.
please.
Give them a
okay,
chance.
but if you people are not in a hurry, I can postpone.
Yeah, it's okay. I mean, 5 minutes are okay.
Okay, I was waiting quite long to ask questions here. This is a topic that has not been discussed so far. I'm a little bit surprised because I think it's quite important. I see a lot of material constraints if we want to go for more than 50%, 60% renewable energy. I think there will come a material constraint. For example, you see the biggest disadvantage with renewable energy is it has a very low energy density. In the morning, as Sarah discussed, the amount of wind turbines we need to replace one big nuclear or coal plant with more than 1,500. You can imagine how much steel we'll need to make that size of wind farms. Similarly, for photovoltaics, maybe silicon is not a problem, but there are already photovoltaics which use other semiconductor materials like germanium and other things. And if you have to store this energy, In batteries, the material requirement for lithium, lead is quite a lot. And to scare you a little bit even more, constructing 1 kilometer of SPVC line will require 80,000 tons of copper. So if you want to extend that all over Europe or all over the world, this much material we don't have. There is a constraint of materials, and I don't know, what is your comment on that? Can we really achieve 50% or 60% or maybe even 100% renewable energy, considering this material limitation in blind earth?
I think yes. But also part of it is, I think we can make some things up as we go. For instance, you mentioned photovoltaics, where you use rare earth materials, which are not as abundant, well, that's why they're called rare earth. In the end, there are already constructions going on in, I've seen some talks at the conference actually, where I was before, that people are starting to realize that they are running into this problem and they are coming up with substitutes. I think technically it is, yeah, it's going to be hard, but I still think it's feasible, yes.
Okay, this will be the last question.
Thank you. I'm called John Mary, from Uganda. One of the issues I'd like to tackle is the financing bit that Michelle talked about. One of the limitations that I saw back home concerning the financing of renewables is that our partners who come to support developing countries actually subsidize these systems, and that is one of the worst things you can ever do, to really encourage the use of RIs in developing countries. So, for example, like the World Bank has always given out free systems to lots of countries, and 6 months later, none of the systems is working. Unfortunately, I've been part of those. So some of the things I'll tell you from what I saw. So I think, in terms of financing renewables, it would be good if we borrow the example of the mobile phone. These phones can be found in any remote part of Africa. Someone always has a phone, but the cost of a phone is not so much different from the cost of a solar antenna. So why do people go for the phone and don't go for the solar antenna? So then you come from somewhere and you say, yeah, we're promoting renewables, have free systems, you know? So for me, I think really, as you said, if we are to create renewables in Africa and developing countries, we have to create market. We have to create market. That is the solution. We cannot encourage these systems to be used by giving them out and giving them in mass numbers, and then we come back 6 months later and there's none of them working. So then, some other point also I'd like to talk about is that we cannot have renewables in isolation. I think someone talked about it. I think Dr. Ulrich talked about it. So here, fine, you come with your solar lantern, give it to someone who has no food. Because you think that the solution for this person is having electricity. No. Needs have, like there is a hierarchy of needs. So if you come and give someone the solar lantern, you will sell it the following day to buy food. So you cannot promote renewables in isolation. They have to come together with other solutions so as to make them more sustainable. Then, finally, also there was the issue of the life psychoanalysis. As someone mentioned, renewables are actually not innocent, because to manufacture a wind turbine, you're using fossil fuel electricity. So all these challenges have to be very put into context. Thank you very much for your patience.
Thank you for
Okay, so now that was the last question. Before finishing it, I would like to ask at least one direct That would be, I mean, in continuation with what John and Krishna said. I would say, I mean, if renewable energies are coming up in a big way, or there is a boom of renewable energy somehow, so what do you think they should not do in the upcoming years? And what safeguards they should take, or what mistakes they should not do, which they might have done in the past, or other energy technologies might have done in the past? Can you just briefly, in 2 sentences, add some thoughts on all of this problem? I mean, what mistakes renewable energy should not do in the upcoming years, so that they become more sustainable?
I can start?
Yeah.
Okay, they should finance this renewables with a method that is in parallel redistributing wealth.
I would wish for renewables to be not considered as a mature part of the electricity system, which also implies that not every last megawatt hour should be sold, but that you, for the sake of grid stability and grid integration, curtail a little bit.
Okay, thank you.
In my opinion, we should be careful as economists not to overvalue the positive social effects of renewable energies. Like as you said, it's not the solution for our social problems. And to think if renewable energies are really, or to what extent they are contributing towards a cleaner world and our climate problems. And not to overvalue this.
Especially thinking of biomass.
Yeah, especially thinking.
I would plead for more integration of the issue of sustainability when discussing integrating renewable energy in society, since to my understanding the issue of really severely questioning renewable energy of their ability to cope with sustainability is a rather young question or rather young discourse, and I think this should be implemented more profoundly into whatever discourse in science and also in the media or in schools or in universities.
Thank you.